It's going to stop.
A Milwaukee judge unloads
I'm not dumb enough to allow this to go on forever.
on the state's largest school district.
I never in a million years thought that they could just break the law.
This week on Open Record,
We do not believe that police officers have any place in our schools.
the controversial law Milwaukee Public Schools didn't ask for,
You treat kids as criminals, it will have an effect on their psyche.
and the long battle over who should foot the bill
City taxpayers are paying the bill no matter what.
for cops in the classroom. From the FOX6 studios, this is Open Record. I'm Bryan Polcyn, and I am here with Sarah Smith, our executive producer. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello. Hi.
And we are joined by FOX6 political reporter Jason Calvi. Welcome back to Open Record.
Thanks for having me on.
We are recording this episode on Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. As we record, the city of Milwaukee and Milwaukee Public School District have 8 days left to get 25 sworn police officers into schools or face possible sanctions and contempt of court. It's already been, I wrote 19 months, it's actually been 20 months, a year and 8 months since Governor Evers signed legislation that included the mandate for school resource officers. This week, we'll explain how we got here, why school officials say they're stuck with a law they never wanted, why a school district parent went to court to force their hand, and what happens next. We'll dive into all of that right after this. Welcome back to Open Record. So 20 months ago, June of 2023, Governor Evers signs a bill giving the city of Milwaukee the ability to levy a sales tax. It's one city leaders said they desperately needed to head off a fiscal cliff due to mounting pension costs. But Republicans in the state legislature said, before you get that, we've got some strings attached. And that included a requirement that Milwaukee Public Schools bring school resource officers back into their buildings. Jason, MPS has had school resource officers before, so let's go back. They had them, they got rid of them. Why did they get rid of them in the first place?
There was a big push. There was a group of young students, leaders, igniting transformation, LIT, and they had pushed to have the school resource officers removed from the campus. There's a, we can get into the arguments, but they were arguing this, you're creating fear amongst the community, you're all the things that people might want to suggest.
We hear about the school to prison pipeline, things like that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so that was all part of the discussions that led to the district kind of stepping back from the contract with Milwaukee Police Department.
Do we know, what I wonder is going back to that time, where was MPS or MPD rather on this too? Were they kind of like, you know what, we'd actually like to get those officers back on the street anyway?
streets,
Were they
yep.
sort of on board with that? Or they're like, look, whatever you say, you don't want us, we'll get out.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked with city leaders, including Mayor Cavalier Johnson, he thought it was a mistake to pull. I mean, that is, remember, the Milwaukee Public Schools Board is independent. It's not the mayor's board. It's the voters. They are accountable to the voters. And at that point in time, they thought that their constituents and were electing them to do this job. And that was potentially to pull the police officers out of the schools.
And so when you talk about the mayor, for someone sitting at home, there's sort of civics lesson here because you've got MPS, which is independent, but then you've got MPD, which is a part of the administration of the mayor. So whether that was Tom Barrett before or now Cavalier Johnson, the police department is, while they're sometimes at odds with maybe the mayor or the common council, they are part of that administration, right?
Right. I mean, the Fire and Police Commission hires the police chief. So it's not the job of the mayor to hire or fire the police chief. It's the Fire and Police Commission that does that. But those appointees come through. So, yeah, there's an overlap with administration here.
I feel like there's a whole flow chart
I
of
was going to
power
say,
here.
it's almost like you need the Venn diagram.
Yeah, it plays into some of what happens with this because there's you end up with a city entity like MPS, even though it's independent and has a school board, fighting with a city entity, which is the mayor's office, which is talking about officers from the police department, which have the fire. And so there's all of these moving parts that make this really complicated. Now, I want to go back because, as I said, this was a law that passed in 2023. The deadline in that law was that they had to have these 25 officers in place by January 1st of 2024. And some people have heard that recently and thought, oh, January 1st, that was just, a little while. No, that was a year and 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Or almost 2 full months ago. So this is like nearly 14 months ago now. At the time, people started asking, well, the deadline passed, what are you doing? And MPS came out and said, oh, well, we've been sending people out to sort of observe what other people are doing. What can you tell us what was going on with that?
Right. So, I mean, the law was passed in the summer of 2023. The governor signed it. This was a bipartisan bill signed, passed by the Republican legislature, signed by the Democratic governor, as part of those long negotiations to boost shared revenue, to allow Milwaukee to have that sales tax. This is something that the city had been asking for a long time. It went back as far as Mayor Barrett, and then Mayor Cavalier Johnson was one negotiating on this particular bill. And part of that was the strings, as you mentioned, Brian, that Republicans added to that, including no taxpayer money going to the streetcar.
Basically killed the future of the streetcar, at least for the time being, because they can't use those local taxes. That was one string.
That was one string. Another string was this issue of the school resource officers, right? So even though the school board, pulled the officers out and stopped the contract with MPD, finally ended the contract in 2020, then the Republican legislators put this into the bill. You have to bring them back. And they gave them from June of 2023, which when this law was signed by the governor, to January. So how many months is that?
That's 6 months. I mean, this is six in a few weeks.
Yeah, so 6 months to implement the school resource officers, to get them trained. The law from the state says that all 25 school resource officers are to do specific training. It lays it out there. It's a week. It's 40 hours training from the National Association of School Resource Officers. They go around the whole country and they do these trainings for school resource officers. So it was in the law. They have to go through that training, and you have 6 months, 7 months to implement it by January 1st, 2024. That day comes around. No police officers, none of them. There's no 25 officers going through the training as well. And then we kept asking the whole year of 2024, what's going on here? What's going on here? What's going on here? And both sides kept saying, well, we're continuing.
We're working on it.
We're working on it. We're working on it. We're working on it. And finally, in the fall of 2024, 6, 7, 8 months after the officers were supposed to be in the classrooms again, a parent sued with this law firm, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, a conservative law firm that sued. And we'll hear a little bit more about that later. But pretty much the negotiations were all about the funding. Who is going to pay for it? Because the state law, Act 12, it does mention a little bit about who's going to pay for it, but it doesn't specifically lay out the percentages or things like that. That's been a big fight for the last 6, 7, 8 months, city and the school board, as far as who's going to pay for it.
Because
how
no
much
one just has money coming out of their ears or anything like that. Can we just back up one quick second on school resource officers? I know it's a term we throw around a lot, and we just kind of maybe assume that everyone knows what a school resource officer is. Are these armed police officers that are in the schools?
Right. These are police officers or Milwaukee. In this situation, it'd be
Police sworn, have a badge. The whole thing, right?
These aren't like community officer, junior.
These are not security guards.
Yeah.
Because Milwaukee Public Schools does have its own force of security guards. These would be MPD, Milwaukee Police Department, police officers, badge, gun, etc., in the classroom, in the schools.
And they are there to maintain the peace in case something, disruption were to happen?
Right, and they would go on and say there's a lot more than that. I mean, they would say that their role is to be a model, an example, and a trusted adult that then they build that relationship.
Yeah.
Even if you had them in the middle schools, or you can build that relationship over the years of the time that the child is in school. Build that relationship to have that trust between a police officer, a positive role model.
Correct. Yeah.
That's the way that the school resource officers I've interviewed would present their job description as.
And some would say as a deterrent, like you've got a police officer on site, it's a deterrent to the fight in the hallway or the driving around the lawn with your car.
Right.
Others would say the symbol of them being there is in fact a sign that you need to be watched by police and you're the kind of people who can't be trusted. So there's that push and pull on those things. One thing that stands out to me in the whole long delay here, and the judge, we're going to talk more about the hearing from Monday, but Judge Borowski, in a pretty remarkable hearing, really seized upon this. It wasn't just that it was taking them a long time to figure this out. It was that you had school board members, the vice president of the school board, who was actually making comments at a Milwaukee Press Club luncheon where she's saying effectively, I don't really want this law. We want to focus on restorative justice. And there's a journalist there who asks, well, is the state going to let you do that? And she says, I don't know, the deadline's already passed, and laughs about it. And Judge Borowski really seized upon how he was upset by that, and it played into his decision. But you get the sense that it wasn't just a matter of negotiating cost, that there was more to this, right? That the school district essentially got saddled with a law that they weren't a part of negotiating and they never wanted in the first place.
Right, and the school board had even pulled the police officers out. You know, 2020 was the end of that contract, but there were steps earlier as well to pull those police officers out of the school buildings. That was their decision. Their elected official. They set the policies, procedures for the district, and they said no more school resource officers. And now all of a sudden, state law comes in and says, nope, you have to bring them back.
And I think that's the politics here are really interesting because it was Mayor Johnson who was, when he started reaching out to Republican lawmakers trying to sort of mend a gap that had existed between the city. Tom Barrett ran against then Governor Walker, and there was a lot of animosity between the Republicans controlling the legislature and the city of Milwaukee. He went to mend fences because they needed money. They needed to stave off this fiscal cliff. But along the way, he made some of those sacrifices, and this was one of them. And I think MPS in this process has sort of expressed that they felt like the city got something out of this. They got all this money. What did we get? We got a law that we've got to figure out. We heard that at that hearing.
Well, and we've been talking about who's going to pay, and that's part of the thing is like, where's the money coming from? How have they paid for them in the past?
Yeah. So, and the interesting point, and this is why journalism and independent press is so crucial to the flourishing of democracy, because we had Mayor Cavalier Johnson on the record citing that previous negotiation or previous contracts between the city and MPS, he said had about a 5-6 break between MPS paying 5-6 and the city paying 1/6 of the salaries for the police officers during the school year. Okay, so let's say the salaries is this.
You're
You
gonna
guys
do
got your no.
I'm waiting for you to do live math.
But
Yeah, me too.
But pretty much
Yeah.
the mayor was saying it was a 5-6 breakdown, and that the majority. What is 5-6? Is it 80? 83%.
83%.
Yeah, that pretty much he was saying that the district in the past had paid 83% of the salaries for those police officers just during the school year. Because guess what?
That's only
the
part of
summer.
year.
The summer
Yep.
months,
Not
that's
needed.
100% paid by the city. But during the school year, he was saying that MPS was paying 83% of the salaries for those school resource officers. We could not find any evidence of that claim at all in any paperwork. We were the only ones that had this documentation in the city. This is why Fox 6 is, leading on this particular issue. We found two contracts. We obtained two contracts between the city of Milwaukee and MPS. This one was from 2009, and at that point, it shows a 50-50 split for the school year, for the salaries of the officers, and it also capped MPS. So it said, hey, if overtime, et cetera, if it gets to a certain dollar percent amount, then MPS won't have to pay over that amount. But it was 50-50 split with a cap for MPS. That was 2009. Then we had the 2015 contract, same thing. More officers at this point, but again, 50-50 split. City's going to pay for half of the officers' salaries and benefits. The district's going to pay for half of the salaries and benefits for half of the officers. 2015 contract, right? And no, there was no 5-6. And so it turned out that the mayor, that was just sort of a story that had been told, and he was getting that from his staff because they were remembering a 5-6, but there was no 5-6. It never was there.
Maybe if you try to say, I don't know how that all plays out. Maybe he was doing some math that if you count only this part of the year, maybe it comes out of that. Whatever it is, this contract says it was 50-50. And whatever it is, there were no school resource officers. We're still waiting for school resource officers.
Yep.
And you mentioned that all changed, or at least this whole process changed, when a parent sued the school district. When we come back, we are going to be joined by Lauren Greuel, an attorney for the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, who filed that lawsuit on behalf of an MPS parent. We'll talk to her when we come right back. And welcome back to Open Record. We are joined on Open Record by Lauren Greuel, an attorney for the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, also known as WILL. Lauren, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So it was October of this past year. It's already been at that point, 10 months since the deadline, a year and many months since the law passed, and you decided to intervene. Why did WILL intervene in this situation?
Yeah, we had a parent who was concerned about the safety of her student in the Milwaukee Public Schools, and she wanted to do something about it. And we at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty saw that these government officials, MPS, was not following the law. And if anything, those should be the people who do follow the law. We were happy to file a suit on behalf of our client.
obviously, to file a lawsuit like this, you do have to have someone so you can have standing. So you had to have this parent. How did you find her, and how did she come to be the plaintiff in this case?
Yeah, she was interested in this issue, so I met with her a couple times, talked about her, learned more about her story, and we decided to have her sign on as a client and file this lawsuit.
Why do you guys think, obviously you take her as a client and because you believe in the case, why does Will believe that these school resource officers are so important, that this is an important issue?
Well, Will believes that nobody is above the law, particularly the people who are passing the laws and who should be enforcing the laws. And here we have city officials and Milwaukee Public School elected officials who, as the judge used the phrase, are thumbing their nose at the law, laughing about it. And this is about the safety of the students in Milwaukee. Most schools in the state of Wisconsin have school resource officers, and parents in Milwaukee deserve to feel safe sending their children to school. It's not fair that they have to worry, that our client has to worry about her son's safety every day. And she has some really harrowing experiences, not just with her son, but with herself. She also is a MPS grad, and she really strongly believes that safety is a huge concern. And on top of everything else, as has been already mentioned, right now, MPS is calling police officers upwards of 3,000 times a school year. So that's multiple times a day. They're having police officers from the city come in who are not specially trained to deal with children, who don't have a relationship with these kids, like you were mentioning some of the benefits of having SROs. So taxpayers in the city, community members, are also less safe because those police officers are getting pulled off the street, pulled into the school to deal with these issues that are happening multiple times a day. And I do really want to emphasize as well, this is a bipartisan bill. Our former state superintendent, Governor Evers, signed this bill into law. So I'm sure, as you guys are well aware, we have a Republican legislature and a Democratic governor. So how many bills really get passed where they all agree on something? And here we have that, right? We have a bipartisan bill where everybody agrees that Milwaukee public students deserve to feel safe and their parents deserve to feel safe sending them to school.
Go ahead, Jason. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, when this bill was passed, I think about if the legislature passes a bill and the governor signs a bill that says you can't go faster than 70 miles an hour on the freeway, and I go 80 miles an hour on the freeway, a police officer can pull me over and enforce that law. In this case, they say you have to have 25 SROs by January 1st of 2024, and then they don't. And then what? And I think for a long time we were all asking, well, can they do anything about this? And is there any enforcement mechanism? Was the law itself deficient in not really setting up any sort of penalty for just simply ignoring the deadline?
There are legal mechanisms in place, and actually we utilized one of them that compels public officials to follow the laws. That's what a writ of mandamus is. That's what we filed back in October, was an application for an alternative writ of mandamus. And again, just a fancy way of saying we want the court to force public officials to follow the law. So that's the enforcement mechanism that we went with. As to whether or not the law was deficient, obviously it would have made things a little bit easier if there was an enforcement mechanism, but there doesn't necessarily need to be an enforcement mechanism in the law for there still to be enforcement. And that's what we're seeing now with this granting of the alternative writ of mandamus, this preemptory writ of mandamus, and then our hearing next Thursday, which we'll talk about. Contempt and sanctions.
So 8 days away, what we're recording right now, 8 days until this deadline to pretty much have 25 officers ready to go.
So is that the 27th of February? Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So if you're listening to this or you're seeing this on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then it's the 27th is the deadline, right?
So now, Act 12 doesn't have an enforcement mechanism in there, but you've filed the lawsuit, the judge is siding with you. So if MPS and the city don't have an agreement in place by that deadline in 8 days, then the judge is going to have the option to lay out penalties, right? So he can do things like sanctions as well as hold them in contempt, and that would have steep fines, right? Potentially.
Yeah, that's correct. So at this point, obviously, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But at the hearing on Monday, Will's suggestion, the plaintiff's suggestion, was that MPS would have to pay what it would cost to have SROs in schools for every day that they don't. Because at the end of the day, now we're seeing that it's all about money. It's all about who's going to pay what, how this is all going to shake out, and it's at the expense of these students' safety. So if they're going to drag their feet, they're not going to do this, and it's going to be a money issue, then the sanctions would be what we think they should be from our perspective, is that they would have to pay, I think it comes out to about $5,000 a day for those SROs for every day that they don't have them in schools.
Lauren, I think now that you raised that question, that's something that I was thinking about as I was watching that hearing on Monday, a pretty extraordinary hearing. And we've heard the MPS council say essentially that they estimated this cost to be about $1.5 million, right? So they were offering 33%. We'll pay a third, which is $500,000. The city said, we're not budging. We want you to pay half. That would be $750,000. I'm doing some quick math. The difference between the two is $250,000. I find that a really interesting number because it's a real nice round number, 250,000 for a school district that just got 250 million in a referendum. They're having this long drawn out debate over $250,000. And it makes me wonder, is this really about money, or was that a mechanism for stalling here?
Yeah, I will say that just this past budget for MPS, over the summer, they approved it in July of 2024, had a $17 million school safety budget. So their entire budget isn't $17 million. This is just for school safety, $17 million. And here we are arguing over pennies on a dollar in comparison, to how much money that they're spending. And I do personally believe that there's probably some ideological debate going on here. They held a listening session in October of 2022 where basically a bunch of LIT students, that organization that you mentioned earlier, came and advocated against having SROs in schools. Again, that's 10 months after they already needed to, as required by law. But I do think that there could be some ideological things going on there, especially from the school board of directors, particularly.
Is that why, in particular, your lawsuit originally just challenged the school district? The judge then, again, added the city onto this lawsuit, I think maybe as a surprise to you. But was that why you just targeted this lawsuit to the school board and not to the city?
We chose to just have the complaint name the city or the school district instead of the school district and the city, because the law says that the school board of a first-class city, which in Wisconsin is only Milwaukee, so Milwaukee Board of School Directors shall have not fewer than 25 SROs in schools by January 1st, 2024. It doesn't say the school and the city. And the only time that the city's mentioned at all in the section of the statute that talks about SROs is it says the city and the school district shall agree to an apportionment of costs. Well, as has been discussed at length in these hearings, what an apportionment of cost means is up for debate. Obviously, a lot of school districts in Wisconsin handle it differently. Sometimes the police cover it entirely. Sometimes the school district covers it entirely. Sometimes it's some combination of the two. But here, it doesn't say that the city actually has to pay anything in the statute. It just says they shall agree to an apportionment of costs. And I think Judge Borowski just wanted to end that debate. I made the point in the hearing, we can't stay in this negotiation phase forever. And this is really where we've been since July of 2023, when the city of Milwaukee decided to pass the increase in sales tax and bring about this part of the law.
So what happens next? I mean, as we sit here talking on Wednesday morning, February 19th, we don't know what's going to happen over the next 8 days. Do you think it's realistic that MPS is going to have these officers in schools, or are you fully prepared to have this sanctions and contempt hearing on the 27th?
We're hopeful, for the sake of students and for the sake of safety in schools, that MPS will follow the law finally and have SROs in schools by next Thursday, the 27th. That's what we wanted all along, was for the safety of the schools to be the priority here. So obviously, we're really, really hopeful that they will get that done. We'll be prepared to advocate for what's best for students in Milwaukee and parents and taxpayers at that next hearing. But I will say they MPS has a meeting, a special meeting tomorrow night to discuss whether or not they will approve the funding necessary to cover 50% of the SROs. So I think we'll have an answer as to whether or not they'll be able to follow the law by tomorrow night.
All right. Lauren Greuel with Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. Thank you so much for joining us here on Open Record.
Thank you for having me.
I do want to point out we did invite Milwaukee Public Schools to and members of the Milwaukee School Board of Directors to appear here on Open Record for this episode. They acknowledged our request. They said they were looking into it. Ultimately did not respond to provide anyone to be here. In the meantime, we have been hearing from many of you at how you feel about all of this, and we're going to talk about some of that right after the break. Welcome back to Open Record. Again, I want to clarify, we did invite MPS to come on this podcast. They didn't provide anyone for us to be here today. So instead, I want to real quickly just, what are some of the major points you heard from MPS on this, Jason? Why have they still not put school resource officers in 20 months after this law was passed and 14 months after their deadline?
I mean, I know we heard from the lawyer there that there's some ideological issues. Remember, there was this pushback from the student organization that really did not want the school resource officers. They pushed for many years and finally were successful in having those MPD officers removed from MPS. The final contract was ended in 2020. And earlier than that as well, bringing the officers out of the school. So that was a long fought push from activist group, and they did not want to see those officers come back. So there's the ideological issue, but then there's also this funding issue, because Act 12 says, and we just heard this, but I want to repeat it, it doesn't clearly lay out who's paying for these school resource officers. We're talking about $1.5 million. Now, when you do the math, you're like, well, that's comes out to like, no, it's because it's just for the school year. How many days are we in session? 10 months of the year, 5 days of the week. So when you're looking at it, it's just the salaries you're talking about for the school year. The city handles 100% of the salaries when the officers are not in the school program. So the question was, who's going to pay for it? Act 12 pretty much just says the city and the district will agree, quote, to an apportionment of the costs of meeting the requirements.
I like that. The city and the school district will agree. Wrong.
Well,
You're wrong.
Debatable.
So now the judge comes in and says, no, this has gone on far too long. January 1st, 2024 is a year and
almost
2 months later. So no, that's it. Now, as we just heard, there's the threat of fines, and very large fines potentially, if they don't have this agreement in place in 8 days. Now, when you look at the law, it says these officers have to go through training, specific training for 40 hours. But the judge said, well, they can be going through the training, but you guys just get the 24 officers in place, sign the deal, and come back to me next week.
You know what I wondered, and I don't know if this is the case, because MPS was offering, like, we'll pay for the training, we just want to pay 33% of the salary. I do wonder, did MPS want to control the training? And I say this for this reason, because there is a focus on restorative justice at MPS. Did they want to make sure that these officers got some training in sort of, if you're going to be here, here's how we want you to approach these things? Was that a part of this at all? Do we know?
Well, the law actually lays out where the training is coming from. So it's an independent organization that would be doing the training. It's called the National Association of School Resource Officers. We spoke to them. We asked them. We went through their curriculum to find out what exactly these officers would be trained to do in the schools. And when you have these agreements between the district and the police department and the city, there's going to be, the school district does have a say in, here's the policies for the school district, right? The officers are in the school district. They're going to be following the policies of MPS, MPD, as well as the training from the school resource officer organization.
Now, we put a QR code up on our screen for some of these stories and had viewers kind of ask us, you have questions about this. What are your questions, Sarah? What do we have?
Yeah, I mean,
we hear from
even
viewers?
just looking from a handful of these, and the first two kind of were just what we were talking about. Paul from Milwaukee, Robin from Butler, they were both asking about, will they be properly trained on how to deal with, quote, problematic children and not handle them like they are, again, quote, common criminals. And so do you know anything about the national, and you said it was an independent agency that's training these officers. Do we know anything about how maybe this training is different than just here's training to be a police officer?
Right. This is remember, everybody that's going to be going through this training program, they're already police officers. They may already be veteran officers who want to maybe get back and work
community work, or
right,
something.
right, something like that. It might be, might be kind of more competitive to, hey, I really want to work with the young people at this point in my career.
Wait, I'm sorry to cut you off. The SROs, are they in elementary all the way through high school?
Well,
is this focused on high schools?
That is the question, right?
Okay,
Because the law, and we can get into that in a second, because I think some of our questions from the audience dealt with where are they going to go. So why don't I just jump into that?
Oh, that's fine.
Because when you hear the number 25, it does feel like this sort of magic number. Why 25?
Yeah.
There's more than 25
and there are
school
so
buildings.
many schools in MPS.
When I talked with the mayor about this and his staff, what I was told by his staff was originally Republicans wanted to have a school resource officer in every single MPS school. I don't have the number off the top of my head. I think it's 156, maybe. Somebody fact check me on that. It's more than 150, and so that is quite a huge amount of money and a number of resource officers in the schools. So the negotiations that I was told happened between the mayor and the Republican legislators. They wanted one in every school. They negotiated it down to 25. That was the agreement point. In 2015, this is the contract from 2015. There were 15 school resource officers in the district.
156 schools.
I was right.
Okay, so if you doing quick math again, 25 into 150, maybe not 156. That's 1/6, right? So did I just do that right? Yeah, I think that's right. So we're talking about now I got to do my 18%, something like that. Am I doing my math right? 18% of the schools would have school, but I'm guessing then. Which 18%, right? Which 25?
Right.
Is it? Are they looking at the calls for service?
Calls? Yeah.
So I'll get to that in a second. The 2015 agreement had 12 officers in the district. Now this new law requires 25 in the district. In the 2008 or 2009 agreement, the school resource officers at that point were 10. There were 10 school resource officers back in 2009. They were at just high schools. They were at Bradley Tech, Custer, Hamilton, Pulaski, and Vincent. So that's 5 high schools. 5 high schools in the district of the 156 schools. That's where they were back in 2009. That's one example. But the law does give some guidance on where these new 25 resource officers need to be. According to Act 12, which was signed by Governor Evers in 2023, the school district next year, the 2025-2026 school district, will be consulting data, stats that a new state law requires districts to be compiling right now as we speak. That's why they're not able to use it for this last school year, because the stats aren't compiled yet. But the next school year, they're to use these stats. The stats require every public high school in Wisconsin to compile stats on crimes on campus. That includes thefts, assaults, things like that. So they have to compile these stats. The state law says that when they're deciding where to place the officers next school year, they're to look at those stats in deciding where to place them.
Do we know with these 25, once police do get them trained up and then they go into these schools, are they being pulled off of street assignments? I mean, does this mean that there are fewer officers on the street to respond to other crimes?
Well, these were officers that were doing other duties. Now they're in the schools, but as we heard from...
With the number of calls to schools.
Right.
The number are more efficient.
Right. And I did do an open records request to find how many calls were to MPS locations, and as we heard, it's thousands.
Well, this is an issue that isn't over. I mean, we're going to still be talking about this. It's so, when we do these really topical things, and we know that this podcast is released on Thursday, the 20th, and it'll air on the broadcast on Sunday night. What would that be? The 22nd, 23rd? Yeah. I got to talk about math, trying to figure out the dates.
Calendars.
But we still don't know. The deadline of the 27th is when we'll find out if there is going to be a hearing on contempt, on sanctions, or if there will be
there's
officers.
a new superintendent in place too, and so how does that all factor into how this could all play out? Like, if obviously she's going to be involved in the new contract or a contract, so I don't know how that shakes out.
Hey, let's just put it this way: MPS has been in the news a lot. lately
Yeah.
for a lot of different reasons. But we really appreciate having Lauren Greuel here from Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. And of course, we're going to keep following this issue for Fox 6 News. Jason, thank you for all of your work on this story. We are going to take a break and go off the record right after this. And it is time for us to go off the record. This is the part of the podcast where we get a little more casual and have a little fun by answering a question for which we have done no preparation, except Sarah Smith has, because she has the question in front of her.
Sure. This is Jason. I don't know that you were here a couple weeks ago. We got to talking about sleeping and things, and do you use a comforter and a fitted sheet? And
Tuck it? Do you not tuck it?
Yeah. Wait. First of all, do you tuck your sheet, the top
End of the
sheet,
bed?
and the end of the bed? Do you tuck it in to the underneath the mattress?
I think so.
Or do you leave it like open like a real sociopath?
Like me.
Like Brian.
And by the way, my wife agrees with you. She says you tuck.
Yeah,
I
I
just
know
don't
she does.
like being jammed.
I don't.
Anyway.
I don't want
Yeah.
it to be tight. Like when you go to the hotel.
You don't want like
and
a
it's super
military.
tight.
Oh,
no, I got to undo that. That's not happening.
Yeah. I always feel like I'm being suffocated.
No, we're not doing that.
Okay, then my other question, because then we really got going, and then it was like, oh, time to go, and the podcast was done, and so I'm like, well, we're going to keep talking about this. At another point, that day is today. Do you wear socks to bed?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. I can't do that.
For a
at
half
all.
a second, I thought you were going to say absolutely.
No, it's kind
Okay.
of like it wasn't much of a talker as you thought. Was it? That's an easy one for me. No.
Okay.
But that leads me to this. If you're actually, do you wear long pants at all to bed?
No,
Like long
absolutely
pajama
not.
Pants?
No.
I can't.
It feels
I can't.
constricting,
Thank
and
you.
I'm like, I'm good.
I can't.
The blanket and the comforter and all the top sheet that all does the trick, right?
That's what I'm
it's
saying. It does enough.
But if I have the socks on, it's not.
No.
That's not right.
And
but I don't know why. Like, where did I learn that? I mean, it's the comfort
Right.
factor, but is there also a scientific rationale for it?
That's a very
Like,
good
does heat-
question. Right.
I don't know.
Well,
You know what I wonder?
Toxins are exiting the feet.
I
I don't know.
wonder if you were a kid who had footy pajamas, maybe you like fox.
Oh no, my feet always got so sweaty in those footy pajamas. I bet if you look back, like all my jammies had like the feet cut off of them because I hated it so bad.
Why
That's probably
don't
a
they? I
bigger
mean, I
problem.
wouldn't want to wear them, but have you ever noticed they don't make adult footy pajamas?
Well, I mean, I bet you could find
yeah,
them.
they kind of do.
Do they?
I mean, as a kind of novelty, I think they do.
Okay. I would not want
Well,
that.
they make
because
onesies.
The whole family will have the same
Yeah.
footy pajamas.
here's the other thing. When it's like, I like when it's cold in the room or cool
Yeah.
at least because I want
Yes.
to be able to cover up with the blankets. But if I'm too warm, I don't know why this is the case, but are you guys the 1 foot
One
comes
leg out?
One leg out is
Yeah.
enough. I don't
One
know
leg,
why.
because it helps that cooling. You get a little cool air. What's a good sleeping temperature, do you think?
Oh, I think like I don't know, 68 degrees is real
68's
nice.
pretty.
Yeah, that's-
62.
What?
And this is the issue. Like,
Are you
if any of the
camping?
if anybody listening is
What about your kids?
in marriage prep, they're getting ready to get married.
Yes.
Like, these issues
Talk
are
about these things.
Yeah, like these are the,
The
things that they don't
temperature.
These are
talk
the
about in the
things
class.
That should
But-
be like one of those things on
It
map.com.
is.
It should be one of the things you flag. What is your preferred
yeah.
temperature?
Yes.
because this is going to
On the
be this
thermostat.
is pretty much, I can tell you, gonna there's probably going to be some
Potentially.
arguments over
Yeah.
the thermometer.
Yes.
One person puts it up, one person puts it down. At night, I like it to be at 62.
Wow. What do your kids say about that?
They're covered up.
What?
Well, I mean, I can see
I
if
guess
you've
they
got
are a
enough
little
covers,
older.
you're fine. But 62's getting there.
No.
For,
How
yeah,
old are your kids?
One just turned 12.
Oh,
And then 12.
They're out of the baby stage, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
the youngest is 5.
Okay, so when I had babies, and I like you, like a lower temperature, I was always more concerned that their little nuggets and their little toe beans and their fingers were gonna like freeze off because
beans?
yeah, the little toes, they're so little, not a lot of. But I was more worried about them, like I didn't want them to get too
They're
cold.
going to get frostbite at 62.
Yeah,
Is that
I don't know.
yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm sweating my butt off. But yes, okay.
My dear late grandmother, who I love very much, was 97 when she passed. She lived at home till she's 97. She was, and I'm sure as you get older, maybe you lose
You get
some,
chilly.
and you get colder,
Yeah.
right? So she was
Every
always
old
very cold.
person is cold.
But we'd go in to visit, and she had her place at 74.
No.
And I felt like I was in a sauna.
Yes.
It was it was crazy.
My
yeah.
mother at this point, her thermostat is up pretty high. And every time I'm like, my inheritance, I can just hear it going to the utility company because I'll come in and I'll like slowly move it back down. She's got one of those like cool, you touch screen, whatever. But I can't handle the heat at her house. Half the time I know to wear short sleeves or shorts or something.
Everybody's wearing shorts during the winter at Grandma's house.
That's right. That's
I feel like Dave's stayed out of this one. I don't know. What's your temperature?
Sleeping temperature?
Yeah. Yeah.
59.
59.
That's cold.
Now,
Wow.
it's my house heats weird, so like the bedroom is fairly warm. So even though you set the thermostat at 59 for the rest of the
Your
house,
room is
the room
okay.
is very warm.
Wow. Brian, you also mentioned the last time, and I wrote it down, and I still don't know what it is. You said grounding sheet.
Yeah, okay.
Did you make that
we
up?
could talk for a while. I keep getting ads for these grounding sheets, and I don't know why. You know, maybe it's because I watched a video or you see something, and all of a sudden
course.
the algorithm
Yeah,
says you
yeah.
were really
It's
interested in this.
targeting you, yeah.
I was interested in actually researching whether it was complete bunk, whether it was snake oil.
Yeah.
And I actually couldn't find anything that definitively said no, this is garbage. In fact, I found
is it?
research out there that's so what it is. It's the whole idea that the Earth has I think the Earth has a positive charge and you have a negative charge, and so resetting your body means like if you walk in the grass barefoot, you walk on ground,
Yeah.
you get grounded and you take in the negative electrons or what I don't know. I'm not I don't know this.
There are websites, a grounding
whole thing.
bed to $99.
So apparently these are things that there's just, you've got your plug, right? It's got the two prongs and the little hole for the grounding wire. Well, these just have a little thing that goes into the grounding part of the plug, which to me sounds like a fire hazard. I don't know. That just seems wrong.
These
But
pictures
it plugs
no.
into only the ground prong and apparently feeds these negatively charged
What? I've never heard of
electrons
this in my
into
life.
this sheet. You don't feel a charge, but apparently it resets your body.
Until I wake up and my eyes are glowing.
It's supposed to reduce inflammation and do all these things. And I'm
Wow.
telling you,
Okay.
I am someone who is such a skeptic. I am determined to prove that this is garbage. And I've not yet been able to prove that it is garbage, but it
Okay.
still feels like it is because it
The
feels
claims are
placebo.
wild.
All of the
Yes.
claims are like, I sleep so much better now, but it feels like it's complete placebo to me.
Well, now I want to know. What if we go in on one together? What if we crowdfund this?
It's got to be complete BS.
What if it
because
isn't?
It sounds
No,
like it.
humans have been, sleeping normally for
Or have
millions
they?
of years.
No, they have not. I mean,
It's
yes,
complete
but no, people.
Do you have pain, Dave? Maybe it's because you don't have a grounding
Do you
sheet.
have inflammation and
I'm
fatigue?
65. Of course I have.
Do you have insomnia and joint pain? But people take sleeping pills. Like, clearly people aren't sleeping well. Like, there's more mental things going on now than ever. And maybe a grounding sheet is the way to go.
I just listened to a podcast all about the Great White Club fire, and which is tragic and awful.
Yeah.
And I just think of inserting something into a plug that isn't a regular 3-prong plug feels to me like a bad idea. I don't know.
I don't know, but well, yeah, that's okay. That's fair. But I mean, I've stutter. I have a heated blanket that stays
Yeah, but that
plugged
still
in.
uses a regular plug. You're not
Yeah.
taking like one piece of a plug. No, I'm just putting in the one
well,
little
it's not like
hole.
Johnny
That
just
doesn't.
and then stuck it in the bottom and crossed his fingers.
It just feels.
You're
I
right.
don't know. I'm sure the people who
There's
make
only
these
one
things
way
are
to
like,
figure
we
this
need to
out.
go on open record and correct Brian as to why he's wrong. If you are really into grounding sheets, feel free to email us and let me know.
Yes.
But I just don't.
I want to know more.
And they don't just have grounding sheets. They apparently have like grounding pads for your knees or
Yeah,
things that
there's
can
a thing
wear
you
on
can
your-
stand on,
like a
yeah.
grounding hat. Like you go to bed with like a
cone
grounding.
head.
I don't know.
Aluminum foil. Okay.
Apparently, what I hear, it works best at 59 degrees.
Hey,
But so Dave, you're not.
Dave
you're
will
not-
buy one.
You're not planning
He's
on
fine.
getting a grounding.
he's got so much
anything?
money.
Not buying it. No.
But that's
Christmas present?
That's
Yeah.
what blew me away, though. I was looking for research, and what I actually found was research that was done. Now, it wasn't like a double-blind, controlled clinical
Yeah,
trial.
yeah.
But there was research that was done where they actually found that there were these benefits. Now, I don't know who was funding that. My guess is someone who sells grounding sheets was probably funding it. I don't know.
Grounding Sheets USA.
But I could not find anyone who came out and said this is not how this works. Like
Wow.
it's not. So there is something.
Okay. Well, I'm
real.
intrigued.
The part that I know is real is apparently there is something about how your body does build up a positive charge, and when you stand on the earth, you sort of it evens out your electric charge somehow. That's apparently true. I don't know what benefit it really has, and whether these sheets or these other things really work.
We got to wrap it up anyway.
Do we? Okay. Oh, I guess
that
we got to
time.
wrap things up. So it's enough of me blathering on about that. Again, if you want to tell me all about it, feel free to email us. We'll take a break and wrap things up when we come right back.
It's not just about telling a story.
It's about making positive change in our community.
Holding the powerful accountable by helping the powerless.
And exposing what you have a right to know.
We are Milwaukee's investigative team.
Because you matter.
All right, that's about all the time we have this week.
That was a very long pause.
But people don't know that there was a commercial break.
I know, you're
and
right.
doing a long pause. Anyway,
It just felt really
that's
long.
about all the time we have this week. Jason, thank you for being here. Really
Yes,
appreciate your time. And of course, Sarah, you as well. If you have a topic you would like us to discuss on Open Record, or an issue you think we should investigate for Fox 6 News, or if you want to tell me all about grounding sheets, send your emails to fox6investigators@fox.com. As always, we thank the people who make this podcast possible, including our executive producer, Sarah Smith, our editor, Dave Machuda, who is manning the video switcher this week, and our chief photographer, Cale Zimney. With that, I'm Bryan Polcyn. We'll be back next week.